The year was 1305, and London streets echoed with the cries of vendors hawking their wares and the clatter of horse hooves on cobblestone. But on this August morning, a different sound would soon fill the air. The roar of a bloodthirsty crowd gathering to witness what would become one of history's most notorious executions. The man they came to see die was William Wallace, the Scottish knight who had dared to defy the English crown and unite his countrymen against foreign rule. What transpired that day was not merely an execution, but a carefully orchestrated theater of cruelty designed to destroy both the man and the symbol he represented. If you're hooked already on this gripping tale of bravery and brutality, hit that like button right now, share this video with your friends who love real history, and subscribe to Emperor's Secrets for more untold stories that peel back the layers of the past. Let's dive deeper together. The popular imagination shaped by Hollywood films and romantic tales has sanitized Wallace's final moments into something almost noble. A quick death for a brave hero. But the reality was far more sinister and infinitely more brutal. King Edward I, known as Longshanks for his towering height and iron will, had crafted Wallace's punishment not just as retribution but as a message that would echo through generations. This was to be a death so horrific, so public, and so thoroughly documented that it would serve as a warning to anyone who dared challenge English authority. The method chosen was hanging, drawing, and quartering, a punishment reserved for traitors that represented the absolute pinnacle of judicial cruelty in medieval England. This wasn't simply about ending a life. It was about the systematic destruction of human dignity, the obliteration of hope, and the creation of a spectacle so terrifying that it would haunt the collective memory of Scotland for centuries to come. Today, on Emperor's Secrets, we strip away the myth and examine the unflinching reality of William Wallace's final hours. But before we get into the grisly details, if this kind of in-depth historical exploration motivates you to learn more about the heroes who shaped our world, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Your support helps us bring these stories to life. To understand the full horror of Wallace's execution, we must first grasp the world that created it. Medieval Scotland in the late 13th and early 14th centuries was a land caught between independence and subjugation, where the concept of nationhood was still forming and loyalty was often determined by survival rather than sentiment. The Scottish Wars of Independence had erupted following a succession crisis after the death of King Alexander III in 1286. Alexander, a strong ruler who had maintained peace and prosperity, died tragically when his horse plunged off a cliff in a storm while he rushed to meet his young bride. This left his granddaughter, Margaret, the Maid of Norway, as heir, but she perished at sea in 1290, en route to Scotland, sparking a power vacuum. 13 claimants vied for the throne in what became known as the Great Cause, and Edward I of England was invited to arbitrate. But Edward, ever the opportunist, demanded recognition as Lord Paramount of Scotland, effectively claiming overlordship. Edward's choice of John Balliol as king in 1292 was short-lived. Balliol, derisively called Tomb Tabard or Empty Coat by the Scots for his perceived weakness, soon chafed under Edward's demands for homage, taxes, and military aid against France. In 1295, Scotland formed the Auld Alliance with France, a defensive pact that would endure for centuries, provoking Edward's wrath. In 1296, Edward invaded, sacking Berwick-upon-Tweed in a massacre that killed thousands, defeating the Scots at Dunbar and forcing Balliol's abdication. He seized the Stone of Destiny, Scotland's coronation stone, and declared himself ruler, installing English governors and extracting oaths of fealty. Into this chaos stepped William Wallace, born around 1270 to a minor noble family in Elderslie, or perhaps Ellerslie, Ayrshire. Historical records are sparse. His father's name, Alan Wallace, appears on a seal from a 1297 letter to Lubeck merchants, but Wallace was no highborn lord like Robert the Bruce. He was a second son, likely educated in Latin and French by Augustinian monks, and may have served as a mercenary in Edward's Welsh campaigns, honing his skills with the longbow and sword. Blind Harry, the 15th-century poet whose epic, The Wallace, romanticized his life, though written 170 years later and blending fact with fiction, described him as a giant of a man, 7 feet tall, with immense strength. While exaggerated, contemporary accounts like Walter Bauer's Scotichronican portray him as tall, broad-shouldered, and fierce, a natural leader. Wallace's entry into rebellion was personal. Legend, amplified by Blind Harry and later Hollywood's Braveheart, claims the English Sheriff of Lanark, William Heselrigg, murdered Wallace's wife or lover, Marion Braidfield, sparking his vengeance. While unverified, it's plausible given the era's brutality. In May 1297, Wallace assassinated Heselrigg in Lanark, dismembering him in a raid that ignited widespread uprisings. He joined forces with William Douglas the Hardy and raided Scone, the ancient coronation site. Meanwhile, Andrew Moray led rebellions in the north from Castle. These were not coordinated at first, but grew into a national movement. The pinnacle of Wallace's military career was the Battle of Stirling Bridge on September 11, 1297. Edward had sent John de Warenne, Earl of Surrey, with 10,000 men to crush the rebels. Wallace and Moray, with perhaps 5,000 infantry and few cavalry, positioned on Abbey Craig overlooking the narrow wooden bridge over the River Forth. As the English crossed in pairs, the Scots waited until half were over, then charged, collapsing the bridge and trapping the vanguard. Hugh de Cressingham, Edward's hated treasurer, was killed, his body flayed, skin reportedly used for Wallace's sword belt, a grim trophy symbolizing defiance. The victory was stunning. English heavy cavalry, invincible elsewhere, bogged down in marshy ground, slaughtered by Scottish spearmen in Chiltern formations, dense pike hedges. This battle wasn't just tactical, it shattered the myth of English invincibility. Moray and Wallace were appointed guardians of Scotland in Balliol's name, issuing charters and seeking international support. Wallace invaded northern England, raiding Northumberland and Cumberland, burning villages and returning with cattle and goods to sustain the resistance. He was knighted, possibly by Robert the Bruce or other earls, at the Forest Kirk in Selkirk. But success bred envy among Scottish nobles, who saw Wallace as an upstart. Edward I, furious, returned from Flanders in 1298 with a massive army. At Falkirk on July 22, Wallace's Chilterns held initially against cavalry charges, but Welsh longbowmen rained arrows, breaking formations. Betrayal rumors swirled. Some nobles allegedly deserted, but Wallace escaped, though thousands died. His guardianship ended. Bruce and John Comyn took over. Wallace turned to guerrilla warfare and diplomacy, traveling to France in 1299 to 1303, seeking aid from Philip IV and even the Pope. Letters of safe conduct from Haakon V of Norway and others were found on him later. By 1304, most Scots submitted to Edward via the Treaty of Stratford. Wallace, refusing pardon, became a fugitive, hunted with a £300 bounty, enormous for the time. His betrayal came from Sir John de Menteith, steward of Dumbarton, who captured him on August 5, 1305, at Robryston near Glasgow. Menteith, once a rebel but now English-aligned, allegedly used a servant's signal to ambush Wallace during supper. Bound in chains, Wallace was rushed south, paraded through Perth where Edward mocked him as King of Outlaws. Hey, if this tale of betrayal and resilience is firing you up, remember to like this video. It motivates us at Emperor Secrets to keep uncovering these hidden gems of history. Share it with someone who needs a dose of inspiration, and subscribe for weekly dives into the lives of legends. The journey from Scotland to London was itself a form of torture designed to break Wallace's spirit before his final punishment. Bound and guarded, he was paraded through English towns where crowds gathered to see the infamous Scottish rebel. This was psychological warfare, at its most calculated. The transformation of a hero into a spectacle, a leader into a curiosity. By the time Wallace reached London after weeks on the road, enduring jeers, stones, and rotten food thrown at him, he had already suffered immense degradation. Historical accounts, like the Lanercost Chronicle, note he was kept in irons, fed sparingly, and denied comforts, his body weakened but spirit unbroken. The trial of William Wallace was a legal farce, but it served important propaganda purpose for the English crown. Held at Westminster Hall on August 23, 1305, the same day as his execution to deny any appeal, the proceedings were in Latin, which Wallace, though educated, may not have fully grasped under duress. Crowned mockingly with laurel as a king of outlaws, he was charged with high treason against Edward, whom he never acknowledged as sovereign. Additional accusations included murder of civilians, sparing neither age nor sex, monk nor nun, sacrilege, attacking churches, arson, robbery, and atrocities during his raids. Wallace's defense was bold. "I could not be a traitor to Edward, for I was never his subject." He admitted fighting the English, but as a defender of Scotland's freedom. The judges, Sir Peter Mallour, Sir Ralph de Sandwich, and others appointed by Edward, ignored this, pronouncing guilt without witnesses or jury. This trial, documented in English rolls, foreshadowed modern war crimes tribunals, as Wallace was accused of violating chivalric codes. Yet it was pure theater, justifying the barbaric sentence. The sentence was pronounced with ceremonial gravity. Wallace was to be drawn through the streets of London, hanged by the neck, but not until dead, disemboweled while still alive, emasculated, beheaded, and his body quartered. Each element carried symbolism. Drawing for degradation as a traitor, hanging for common criminality, evisceration and burning of entrails for purging corruption, bowels seen as seed of pity, emasculation for violating loyalty, beheading for outlawry, quartering for total annihilation, body parts displayed to deter rebellion. To add more depth, let's explore the origins of this punishment. Hanging, drawing, and quartering evolved from earlier Anglo-Saxon and Norman practices, formalized under Henry III for treason. By Edward's reign, it was standard for high-profile cases, like Dafydd ap Gruffydd in 1283, the last Welsh prince, executed similarly after rebelling. Edward, having crushed Wales, applied the same to Scotland, viewing both as unruly provinces. Historians debate if Wallace felt fear. Blind Harry claims he prayed calmly, but English sources portray him defiant. The morning of August 23, 1305, dawned clear and warm in London. The city had been preparing for this spectacle for days, with scaffolds erected and crowds gathering from across England to witness the death of the Scottish rebel. The authorities had turned Wallace's execution into a public holiday, complete with vendors selling food and drink to the assembled masses. This wasn't just about justice. It was entertainment, a reminder of the power of the English crown and the fate that awaited those who dared to challenge it. Wallace was stripped naked, a further humiliation, exposing him to ridicule, and bound to a hurdle, a sledge-like frame dragged by horses. The route from Westminster, or the Tower, sources vary, to Smithfield snaked through Cheapside, Cornhill, and other busy streets, over 4 miles to maximize exposure. Cobblestones gouged his skin, blood trailing as crowds of thousands jeered, spat, and pelted him with filth. The Lanercost Chronicle describes the scene. He was drawn through the streets, amid the clamor of the people. This drawing could take hours, prolonging agony. At Smithfield, a livestock market turned execution ground, site of later Bartholomew Fair. A high gallows awaited amid a carnival atmosphere. Spectators, from nobles in stands to peasants, bought ale and pies. The executioner, likely Jack Ketch or a professional hangman paid per job, was skilled in prolonging suffering. First hanging, Wallace was hoisted by a noose, positioned for slow strangulation, not neck snap. He dangled, legs kicking, face purpling, for minutes until near death, then cut down alive, gasping. Next, emasculation, genitals severed, symbolizing loss of manhood and lineage. Then, disemboweling, abdomen slit, intestines pulled out slowly, shown to him, then burned in a brazier. Accounts vary on screams. Some say he cried out, others he remained silent, but the pain was unimaginable, organs steaming as burned. The smell of roasting flesh sickened even hardened watchers. Historians like Andrew Fisher note from Pipe Rolls, financial records, that costs included rope, knives, and tar for preservation, pound 1/10, a tidy sum. A newly discovered 1305 exchequer roll confirms. Drawn, hanged, beheaded, his entrails burned, and his body quartered. Finally, beheading with an axe, blood spurting. The body quartered, limbs hacked off, torso divided. No mercy stroke, he endured all conscious. The disposal of Wallace's remains was as calculated as his execution. His head, dipped in tar against rot, spiked on London Bridge beside other traitors, gazing south as warning to visitors. Quarters sent to Newcastle, Berwick, Stirling, and Perth, key rebellion sites, to terrorize Scots. One arm perhaps to Aberdeen, per some chronicles. This gibbeting was common, Daffod's parts similarly displayed. If this raw history shocks and inspires you, like and subscribe to Empress Secrets, your channel for empowering tales of resilience. Share to spread the motivation. True strength comes from standing firm. The immediate aftermath saw Scottish resistance falter. Many submitted, fearing similar fate. Edward proclaimed victory, but miscalculated. Wallace's martyrdom galvanized. Robert the Bruce, absent from trial but moved by horror, rebelled in 1306, murdering John Comyn and crowning himself king. At Bannockburn in 1314, Bruce's victory echoed Stirling, Chilterns triumphing. Bruce reportedly lamented not aiding Wallace, vowing vengeance. The execution's brutality backfired, fostering no surrender ethos. Scots fought desperately, knowing capture meant torture. Internationally, it tarnished England's reputation. French and papal courts decried cruelty, aiding Scottish diplomacy. Historical sources. English chronicles like Lanercost and Floris Historiarum detail clinically, portraying Wallace as villain. Scottish ones, like John of Forden's Chronica Gentis Scotorum, hail him martyr. Blind Harry's poem, source for many myths, adds speeches and heroism but invents much, like Wife Marion. Legal records in National Archives confirm planning. Legacy. Wallace became Scottish nationalism's foundation. Statues at Stirling, 1869, resembling Mel Gibson post-Braveheart, and Edinburgh Castle honor him. Blind Harry's work inspired Burns Scott. Braveheart, 1995, mythologized no kilts 300 years later, no princess affair, Isabella was 9, arrived 1308, no freedom, cry invention. Reality grimmer, no heroic speech, just agony. Films sanitized evisceration. Culturally, ballads like Scots Wha Hae evoke him. Psychologically, execution created trauma, unifying Scots through shared outrage. It influenced human rights. Later thinkers cited as judicial excess, paving way for bans on cruel punishment. Edward I, Hammer of the Scots, died 1307 en route to Scotland, bones boiled per request for battle carry, unfulfilled. His son Edward II lost at Bannockburn. Reflecting, Wallace's story shows power's fragility. Crowds cheering suffering reveals sanctioned cruelty's normalization. Yet his defiance proves spirit endures. In modern times, amid freedom struggles, Wallace inspires. From American Revolution to anti-colonial movements, his tale resonates. If motivated by this epic, like, share, subscribe to Empress Secrets. Your engagement fuels more content. Let's honor sacrifices by learning and acting. Edward I background, born 1239, son of Henry III, crusade in Holy Land, conquered Wales 1282–83, expelling Jews 1290 for finances. Tall, 6 feet 2 inches. Temperamental, his Longshanks nickname fit. Viewed Scotland as extension of empire, like Ireland. Stirling Bridge tactics, Moray's role underrated. He died November 1297 from wounds. Wallace's intelligence from spies key. Falkirk, 6,000 Scots versus 15,000 English. Longbow's decisive, precursor to Agincourt. Post-Falkirk, Wallace in France, letter to Pope Boniface VIII pleading Scotland's case. Betrayal details, Menteith rewarded with lands, but later Scots vilified him as Fos Menteith. Trial charges, treason for, usurping crown by guardianship, murders at barrack raids. Execution witnesses. Foreign ambassadors reported to Europe, aiding Scottish propaganda. Aftermath. Bruce's 1306 revolt. Comyn stabbed in Greyfriars Church. Excommunication, but persistence led to independence declaration at Arbroath 1320. Legacy expansions. 19th century Romanticism amid Union debates. Wallace Monument, 220 feet, built 1861–69, houses Wallace sword, 5 feet 4 inches claymore, possibly his. Myths, no blue face paint, Pictish ancient. No prima nocta, fabricated. Wallace not peasant, but gentry. Cultural impact. Operas, novels, films like Outlaw King, 2018, more accurate. Psychological. Trauma theory. Execution as collective wound, fostering resilience. International law. Wallace's trial early, crimes against humanity precedent. Modern relevance. Parallels to freedom fighters like Mandela, Guevara. Death amplifying message.